Perhaps you've noticed, as we have, that COVID adds stress to marriage. And it can take a good marriage and push it into struggling.
Yep.
And it can take a struggling marriage and push it into crashing. It's just the nature of stress. And it's not like we need more stress in marriage, do we?
No. This whole COVID season has been pretty stressful. We lead 12 Stone Church, and at the beginning, it got shut down. All of our campuses got shut down. And then after that, we reopened after a while. But that was stressful as well, because
still is.
Right, with the social distancing and mask wearing and all of that kind of thing. Then there was the home front, which that's interesting too, because you have your spouse, like Kevin here, who's been home the whole time.
And you're loving that. More togetherness.
Well, you know,
Tell
some
them
of
you
the
love
time. I love it. And then we have Jaden, who is a senior in high school, but his junior year was crazy at the end because of the online schooling. And then as his senior year starts, there's just a lot of senior things that can't happen because of COVID.
Right.
So needless to say, marriage and family is stressful during COVID.
It is. And so who knew how perfectly that would set up the release of the book, The Second Happy. The 7 practices to make your marriage better than your honeymoon. And we need that now. And while we put the best 7 practices in the book, we've certainly learned more than 7 all these years. So we thought, well, let's just try and help as best we can. Let's throw another a 12-minute bonus, okay? We'll call it a bonus lesson, and we'll call it the Coca-Cola lesson, and we'll answer the question, how do you de-stress your marriage? Especially during COVID. COVID, like a lot of things that come into your life, have a way of just shaking things up. So if these cans represent us, if it represents your marriage and how COVID and external things like finance and job change and financial uncertainty and stress with where things going to go politically and conflict in the home, and it just has a way of shaking things up. And you know what's coming. When it shakes things up like that and then you open the can, or like if I just take and open it this way.
No.
Well, you know why I'm not going to do it that way, but I sort of want to. I'll just let you see, right? And it just makes a mess. And what it does is it makes a mess in your marriage, and in your relationship, and in your home. There are a couple of things that we can learn from the mess, because it's not only what's happening external while it's being shaken, but it's what's happening internally. So we call it the Coca-Cola lesson, and there's a couple of things we can learn, and here they are. Stop shaking the can. I mean, if this is the picture, then let me give you the practices. Number 1, stop shaking the can. We'll get into that. And number 2, let the fizz fizzle out. Let's unpack them one at a time. Let's talk about stop shaking the can. Well, let's be honest. You can't control circumstances in COVID. If it's going to come into your life and it's going to shake the can, so to speak, you can't control all of that. But equally, you can stop some of the shaking. You can slow it down. You can minimize the shaking on the outside by the way you handle life. How do you do that? Well, with pre-agreements. Let's talk about that a little bit. With pre-agreements. Pre-agreements, you can call it pre-planning, you can call it pre-decision making, but it is the power of engaging an agreement. It's going after your expectations before anything happens, and then agreeing on how you're going to handle it. That is the power of pre-agreement. And when you pre-agree, you can stop a whole lot of the shaking that comes your way and adds stress to marriage. Honestly, that's all financial budgeting is. Financial budgeting is just a pre-agreement. It's looking at expectations and it's discussing together, okay, how are we going to earn money? And then how do we live inside that lifestyle? And if you live beyond it, well, you're going to have a whole lot of shaking and you're making those decisions. If you live under it and inside it and below your income, oh, you've helped slow down the shaking. Candidly, truth to be told, when it comes to budgeting, we just pre-agree to have margin. In fact, we've built an emergency account. We call it Stuff Happens. We just put in the bank an account that we know we're gonna spend. Initially, it started $500 because, well, that was the next accident. We know we're gonna have an accident. Don't you know you're gonna have accidents? I mean, you're just gonna have a car accident. So you gotta have the deductible already there. So that when the accident happens, it does shake, but not as vigorously because, well, honestly, you were ready for it. So we put $1,000, $2,000 in that account. It's margin. See, we help prepare for the unexpected and we're ready. Equally, we put together margin so that when we hit things like credit card. In fact, honestly, one of our patterns in the whole credit card is that we don't use credit card to purchase. We use credit card as cash flow. We learned a long time ago that when the credit card bill comes, if we didn't already have the cash available, then we're adding stress to our life. We made that mistake and we eventually paid it off, and we only spend money on credit card. It's a pre-decision. It's a pre-agreement. We only spend money on credit card if we have the cash in the bank. When the bill comes, well, it doesn't shake us. See, you have something to do with whether or not circumstances shake up your marriage and add stress. That's true when it comes to allowance. We give ourselves a little allowance. When it comes to an allowance, back to 3 decades ago, it was $5, $10, $15. It's obviously grown with time, but we have no accountability for how we spend it. But when it comes to everything together outside of the allowance, it's shared conversation, it's mutual agreement. And that's so that we minimize the shaking. Let me just be candid and say that these practices of pre-agreement, setting expectation and knowing how we're going to handle it ahead of time, of setting something as practical as budget and being disciplined, those practices, they stop a whole lot of the shaking that produces the stress, that produces the spew that makes the mess in marriage. I'm telling you, it'll help you. We've learned that really, when we have understood shared expectations, we have less stress. Or let me just say it another way. When you have unmet expectations, it increases your stress and it decreases your happiness. So, there's the first one. Let's go to the second. Let the fizzle out. See what we've been doing on this whole shaking of the can, that's all on the outside. But what's true is what shakes on the outside has an impact on the inside. That's why, well, when you open the Coke can, it spews all over. But the inside, there's just a practice. Let the fizzle out. What do I mean by that? Well, obviously, if you shake the can and then, here we go, we know what that's going to do again, and then you just, hold it. Well, that's open. That didn't spew anywhere. All right. This could be a little hokey, I know, but stay with me. This is really helpful. See, if you take these cans and open them up, you'll discover that, well, this one right here this is just, well, it's juice. This right here, this is as you would expect. This is the Coke can. This is Diet Coke. It's what I prefer. Here's what we figured out in our marriage. Honestly, I'm a little more Diet Coke and my wife's a little more juice. Meaning I have a whole lot of carbonation. I have fizz. And when things get shaken up on the outside, they get shaken up on the inside, and I tend to build up pressure and not so much her, which makes a point here. And that is that the stress, the shaking around you isn't always responsible for what's going on within you. Sometimes it's just how you're made on the inside. So a great lesson is let the fizz fizzle. Give it time to settle. See, I know that you can shake a Coke can, and if you give it a little bit of time, the fizz will fizzle down, and you can open it without spewing all over the marriage and other people. Need a little time. Contents are under pressure. Don't open when contents are under pressure. That's what James chapter 4 is talking about in the Bible. Why do you have fights and quarrels among you? Is it not because you have a war within you? There's unresolved issues, selfishness and the like. Well, I'm going to have to deal with those. We all are. Chapter 3 says, tame your tongue. It means that if you're under pressure and you just let it go and say whatever's on your mind, and like the Diet Coke can, you just let it spew, it's going to make a mess all over everyone. And in other words, a little match can start a forest fire. Be very careful. Do not open the can under pressure. Do not open your mouth under pressure. Really practical. Just, I got to let it calm and fizzle. Whether it comes to marriage or traffic or business or family or whatever stress financially or job comes my way. In fact, Proverbs chapter 15 has perhaps been one of the most helpful things God's ever taught me. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. In other words, it shakes up conflict. In other words, I've had to memorize that. And at the moment that I'm going to open the can, even if I got pressure within, I have to give a soft answer. I 1,000 times I've recalled that verse because I know that I'm making a decision as to whether or not I add to the conflict or whether or not I let the fizz fizzle and give a calm answer. It's true in marriage, it's true in a relationship. It stirs up anger. Well, there you go. Well, that's it, Marcia, right? That's our Coca-Cola lesson. And honestly, the other 7 lessons help you figure out how do you de-stress in marriage, and particularly under COVID. And so there are 7 practices to make your marriage better than your honeymoon. It's all in the second happy. Get a copy, because most of us lose our first happy and we got to rebuild a second happy. Get a copy for yourself, and there's questions at the end. You go out on a date night, read a chapter and decompress it together with questions. You can do it with small group. We've set it up so you can jump in a small group. Our hope is to help you build a better and happier marriage.